right. The Bible box is the chapter title for the Christmas box on chapter 3. I don't remember any of my voices, so you're going to get whatever I come up with, okay, guys? Sunday was not proclaimed the day of rest by a mother with a family to ready for church. But such is the irony of piousness. Upon our return home at the conclusion of the day's churching, we reveled in the discovery of a glorious new lifestyle. It was in our last apartment. We had had such little space, we found ourselves looking for ways to spend our Sunday afternoons outside the home. Now we defiantly spread our things and ourselves throughout our quarters. I napped in front of the drawing room fireplace while Carrie read in the bedroom and Jenna played quietly in the nursery. What we may have lost in family togetherness, we more than made up for in sanity. At 6:15, Carrie woke me, and after washing up, we descended the stairs to Mary's dining room. It smelled wonderfully of roast beef and gravy and freshly baked rolls. The dining room was spacious, and in typical Victorian style, the floor was covered with a colorful Persian rug that stopped short of the walls, leaving a border of the polished hardwood floors exposed. The room was built around a large, rectangular, white-laced dining table. A Strauss crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling directly above the center of the table, suspended above a vase of freshly cut flowers. The east wall had an elaborate built-in china closet displaying the home's exquisite porcelain dinnerware. On the opposite wall was a fireplace, as ornately carved as the parlor fireplace, but of lighter wood. The mantel extended to the ceiling, and the firebox and hearth were tiled in marbled blue and white patterns. To either side of the fireplace were walnut side chairs with Gothic carved backs and tucked haircloth upholstery. Mary met us at the doorway and thanked us graciously for joining her. "I'm so glad that you could come," she said. "The pleasure is ours," I assured her. "You really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble," said Carrie. Mary was a hostess of the highest order and would not feel the affair worthwhile had she not gone to a lot of trouble. "It was no trouble at all," she said instinctively. "The place settings were immaculate and beautiful, and the china plates were trimmed in 24-karat gold. Please sit down," she urged, motioning to some chairs. We took our seats and waited for her to join us. Always pray before I eat," she said. "Would you please join me?" We bowed our heads. "Dear Lord, thank you for this bounty which we have during this blessed Christmas season. Thank you for these new friends. Please bless them in their needs and their desires. Amen." We lifted our heads. "Thank you," I said. Mary uncovered a woven basket of steaming rolls, broke them apart, and placed one on each of our plates. She then filled our goblets with water, and the food-laden platters were passed around the table. "So, how are your quarters?" Mary asked. "Have you moved all your things?" "We have," Carrie replied. "There was enough room in the attic. I was afraid it might be a little cramped." I'll try that again, guys. "There was enough room in the attic. I was afraid it might be a little cramped." "Plenty," I assured her. "We don't own much furniture." I lifted another spoonful from my plate and then added, "You really have some beautiful things up there." She smiled. "Yes, that's mostly my David's doings. David loved to collect things. As a businessman, he traveled all around the world. He always brought something back from each journey. In his spare time, he became very knowledgeable about furniture antiques. A few years before he died, he had started collecting Bibles." I bobbed my head in interest. "See this Bible over here?" she said. She motioned to a large, leather-bound book sitting alone on a black leather-bound book sitting alone on a black lacquer papier-mâché table inlaid with mother of pearl. "That Bible is over 250 years old. It was one of David's favorite finds," she shared joyously. "He brought it back from Britain. Collectors call it the Wicked Bible. In the first printing, the printer made an error, and in Exodus, they omitted the word 'not' from the seventh commandment. It reads, 'Thou shalt commit adultery.'" "That's deplorable," Carrie chuckled. Mary laughed out loud. "It's true," she said. "After supper, you're welcome to look it up. The British Crown fined the printer £300 for the mistake." "That was a costly mistake," I said. It was a very popular version, she said, smiling mischievously. In the front parlor is a French Bible with what they call four-edged painting. If you fan the pages back, there's a watercolor of the Nativity. It was a unique art form of the period. Upstairs in the attic is a Bible box that David bought for it, but I think the book is so beautiful that I leave it out. The Christmas box, I said. She looked surprised at my familiarity with the box. Yes, there's a nativity scene etched in the wood of the Madonna and the baby Jesus. I saw it up there. It's very beautiful. It's not from France, though, she explained. I believe it was from Sweden. Fine box making was an art in the Scandinavian countries. When David passed away, I received not a few requests to purchase the Bibles. Except for the Bible I donated to the church, and the 3 that I still have, I sold the rest. I just couldn't part with these 3. David took such joy in them. They were his favorite treasures. Where's the 3rd Bible? I asked. I keep it in my den for my personal reading. I'm sure there are some collectors that would have had my head for doing so, but it has special significance to me. She looked down at Jenna. But enough of these old things. Tell me about your sweet little 3-year-old, she said kindly. Jenna had been sitting quietly, cautiously sampling her food, largely ignored by all of us. She looked up shyly. Jenna is going to be 4 in January, Carrie said. I'm going to be this many, Jenna said proudly, extending a hand with one digit inverted. That's a wonderful age, Mary explained. Do you like your new home? I like my bed, she said matter-of-factly. She's glad to get out of her crib, Carrie explained. We didn't have room in our last apartment for a bed. She was devastated when she found out that she was the only one in her dance class who slept in a crib. Mary smiled sympathetically. Oh, speaking of dance, Carrie remembered, turning to me. Jenna's Christmas dance recital is this Saturday. Can you make it? I frowned. I'm afraid not. Saturday's going to be a busy day at the shop with all the December weddings and Christmas formals. It must be a very busy time of the year for your type of business, Mary offered. It is, I replied, but it drops off in January. She nodded politely, then turned to Carrie. Well, I, for one, am glad that Jenna likes it here, and if you're wanting for company, I would love to take Richard's place at that dance recital. You are more than welcome to join us, Carrie said. Jenna smiled. Then it's a date, and, she said, looking at Jenna, for the little dancer, I made some chocolate Christmas pudding. Would you like some? Jenna smiled hungrily. I hope you don't mind, Mary said, turning to us. She hasn't finished her supper. Of course not, Carrie said. That was very thoughtful of you. Mary excused herself from the table and returned carrying a tray of crystal bowls filled with steaming pudding. She served Jenna first. This is very good, I said, plunging a spoonful into my mouth. Everything is delicious, Carrie said. Thank you. The conversation lulled while we enjoyed the dessert. Jenna was the first to break the silence. I know why flies come in the house, she announced unexpectedly. We looked at her curiously. You do? Mary asked. Jenna looked at us seriously. They come in to find their friends. We all stifled a little laugh as the little girl was in earnest. And then we kill them. Carrie and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. My, you have a little thinker, Mary said. She chuckled, then leaned over and gave Jenna a hug. I'd like to propose a toast, Mary said. She raised a crystal glass of wine. Following Mary's lead, we poured our glasses half full of the rose liquid and held them in the air. To a new friendship and a wonderful Christmas. Hear, hear, I said emphatically. A wonderful Christmas, Carrie repeated. The rest of the evening was spent in pleasant conversation, punctuated with laughter. When we had finished eating, we lavishly praised Mary for a wonderful meal and transported the dishes to the downstairs kitchen. Mary firmly insisted on cleaning up the dishes herself, so reluctantly we left her to the chore and returned upstairs to our wing. I feel like I've known her all my life, Carrie said. Like a grandmother, I observed. Jenna smiled and raced up the stairs ahead of us. The ritual of cohabitation took on a natural and casual openness welcomed by all. It soon became clear to Carrie and me that Mary had solicited a family to move in with her more for the sake of family than real physical need. She could easily have hired servants, as there obviously had been in the past, and she seemed to trouble herself immensely to make our stay amiable, to the extent of hiring out any chore that Carrie or I might find overly tedious or time-consuming, except when said chore would invoke a vicarious act of a familial nature. Bringing home the Christmas tree was such an occasion. Mary, upon finding the largest, most perfectly shaped tree in the lot, offered to purchase a second pine for our quarters. She was absolutely delighted when Carrie suggested that we might all enjoy sharing the same tree together. We brought the tree home, and after much fussing, the fresh scent of evergreen permeated the den. Not surprisingly, the room became a favorite place for us to congregate after supper. We enjoyed Mary's company as much as she desired ours, and Jenna accepted her readily as a surrogate grandmother. Some people were born to work for others, not in a mindless, servile way. Rather, they simply work better in a set regimen of daily tasks and functions. Others were born of the entrepreneur spirit and enjoyed the demands of self-determination and the roll of the dice. Much to my detriment, I was born of the latter spirit. Frankly, that spirit was just as potent a draw to return to my hometown as the quaint streets and white-capped mountains I had grown up loving. As stated previously, Carrie and I left Southern California for the opportunity to operate a formal wear business. Though formal wear rental is quite common now, at the time it was new and untested and therefore exciting. The opportunity came by way of a friend who found himself in a small town just north of Salt Lake City called Bountiful for a wedding. That is when he met my future partner, an enterprising tailor who had begun leasing elaborate bride gowns and soon discovered a greater need for suitable accoutrements for the brides and bridesmaids' counterparts. As necessity is the mother of profit, he began renting a line of men's dinner jackets with great success. It was at this time that my friend, while dressed in one of those suits, had, unbeknownst to me, engaged the proprietor in a lengthy discussion on the state and future of his business. Having been impressed with expectations of my marketing prowess, the owner called me directly, and after many long-distance phone conversations, offered to sell me a portion of the new company in exchange for my expertise and a small cash outlay, which Carrie and I managed to scrape together. The opportunity was all we could have hoped for, and the business showed signs of great promise. Under my direction, we increased our market by producing picture catalogs of our suits and sending them to dressmakers and wedding halls outside of the metropolitan area. They became the retailers of our suits, which they rented to their clientele and received no small commission in the transaction. The paperwork of this new venture was enormous and complex, but the success of my ideas consumed me, and I found myself gradually drawn away from the comparatively relaxed environment of home. In modern business vernacular, there is a popular term, opportunity costs. The term is based on the assumption that since all resources, mainly time and money, are limited, the successful businessman weighs all ventures based on what opportunities are to be lost in the transaction. Perhaps if I had seen my daughter's longing eyes staring back at me from gold-plated scales, I would have rethought my priorities. I adroitly rationalized my absence from home on necessity and told myself that my family would someday welcome the sacrifice by feasting with me on the fruits of my labors. In retrospect, I should have tasted those fruits for bitterness a little more often. And that was chapter 3.